Hello, today I'm excited to introduce to you my new friend Susy Flory. You may have heard of her. She's prolific writer. How many? 16 books, Susy? 16 books?
17 now.
17 now. Plus she's in a doctoral program, which is you're going to have to kind of write a book to get finished with that. I met Susy last fall at the West Coast Christian Writers Conference. She was so gracious to speak as well as to meet with me personally. And her most recent book is Sanctuary. We're going to be talking about that. And also, The Unbreakable Boy, is that really being made into a movie right now?
It's already a movie and it releases February 25th,
Of next year, February,
2025.
all
Yeah.
right,
It
February
was
20.
made during the pandemic, so they couldn't release it when it was
Oh,
made. So they've been holding it and now
okay.
it's finally getting
Uh,
released.
Okay. She's a New York Times bestselling author, and she has this group called Everything Memoir, where you train people how to write their own memoirs. How did you get started in that?
I had a lot of people asking me for advice or asking me to write their book for them.
Oh,
And so instead of trying to help many people at once, I thought, well, I just better start a group and maybe I can help them in that group and also find community with other people who are working on their
mhm.
stories.
And why do you think memoir is so important and significant? And actually, people really love reading memoirs if they're well
They
written.
do. And Sue, I just have to say, you pushed on one of my pain points
Oh,
because often we have in the Christian publishing world people saying no one buys memoir. Meanwhile, you walk into a bookstore and there's shelves full of them, and I have shelves. So there's something there that's funny. But I agree with you. I love to read them.
mhm,
I find people endlessly fascinating. I have a degree in psychology,
mm,
and everyone has a story. And
mm,
so I love to talk to people and ask questions and hear their stories. And I
mm.
love to help people get their stories out there in a form that other people will enjoy and not be bored by,
Yes.
or, you know what
Yeah.
I mean.
I totally know what you mean. And it's true with speakers as well. People have a fascinating story, but if they don't know how to present well, then you don't get to the second paragraph before people are out the door in their minds. Um, Everybody has a story. That's a theme I hear a lot these days. And I am a storyteller, and so are you. Um, my favorite memoir, it's not a Christian one, is called Girl in a Little Black Dress. Mennonite in a Black Dress?
Yes, I read that.
Yeah, well done. I thought it was well written.
So good and such a great title.
A
Just a great
great
book.
title. A title can really draw you in. Um, tell me a little bit to begin with about your family, your ministry, and your work.
My mother, let me start with her,
Okay.
was Irish.
Oh,
She was an O'Doherty from Donegal, which is
hmm.
up in the wild north of Ireland. And she believed she was an Irish princess descended from Irish chieftains.
Wow.
And in fact, she wrote a memoir called Ozark Princess. She was
Huh.
from the Ozark Mountains in Arkansas.
Huh.
She was a fantastic storyteller. She could keep you just, she would draw you in and you would just be hanging on every word. And she could do it with a little joke. She could do it with just telling a little story, or she could spin a longer yarn. And
Hmm.
so from when I was a kid, I was hearing her tell these stories, not all of them 100% true. I'm going to add. And I finally realized from her stories, she came from a long line of Irish storytellers.
Hmm.
So I'm hoping I've inherited a little bit of that and
Mhm.
also been trained, just sitting around with my mom. She's no longer around, but I cannot do it the same way she did verbally,
Mhm.
but I think I can do it with a pen. And so I
Was
was
she
raised by her
was she an
and my
extrovert or an introvert?
extrovert.
Okay. And did she have the brogue then to go with it? The Irish accent.
She did not.
Oh,
Our ancestors came over in the 1700s.
oh, there we go.
So
Well, the Ozarks would have their own brogue, so.
they do. She had a bit of an Arkansas accent. My dad was a Texas cowboy,
Oh.
so I grew up loving horses. We always had horses. I grew up on a horse. So Irish cowgirl, that's the closest I can come to telling you my background.
I love it. And you have children?
My son was in the Navy for years. He's a teacher. and also now a financial analyst. And he loves mountain climbing
Hmm.
uh, and adventures. And he and his wife, Angela, just had their first baby, Jasper. So I'm now a grandmother. I'm a nana. I'm an Irish nana.
Love it.
And my daughter is lives with us and she works in wildlife rescue
Oh,
and
wow.
rehabilitation. She's a squirrel specialist.
Wow.
And so we have
A,
a
a
barn on our
squirrel specialist. I would think I was too, because I used to teach ninth grade English high school, but
very similar.
very,
Very similar. Squirrels are really smart, but they are typically working against you in
yes.
whatever you want them to do or don't
Wow.
want them to do. They
Wow.
do their own thing. So there are 6 different kinds of squirrels up here, including flying squirrels. And we have a barn on our property that has squirrels in it that she's
Wow.
taking care of.
I have never heard of that. Just like I'd never heard of a donkey sanctuary. And where do you live?
I live in the Sierra Nevada mountains of California,
Mhm.
just up by Lake Tahoe. So if you drew a line from San Francisco going east, we're right up there in the mountains. And I know a lot of people who don't know California think we don't have mountains, and I can
Oh,
tell you
yeah.
we do.
Yeah, that's right. And I live in San Luis Obispo, and my kids have always wanted us to buy a place in Lake Tahoe, Mom. Well, that is beautiful. And you do get some rough weather up there.
We do. We get blizzards. We have fire season. That's
Mhm.
something I had to learn about. We're just starting to get into that actually. We have my neighbors are mountain lions and bears and bobcats. And we had a bobcat this morning after our chickens, and my daughter had to chase it off the property several
Hmm.
times.
I thought you said your neighbors are Kathy and Roger Lip.
They are. They are also our neighbors. And yeah, in between us, we have a
Yeah.
lot of wildlife and wilderness.
Yes, they've been on my podcast and they are delightful. When did you know you wanted to be a writer?
I have always loved books. I just, my imagination was always, uh, enraptured within the covers of a book at any given moment. And the
Okay.
library was my stomping grounds. Um, I deep down inside, I think, I don't know, even know if I verbalized it, but just always revered writing and writers. And as I got into probably my high school years, I had a couple teachers say, you should be a writer. I didn't
Hmm.
take it seriously because I didn't know any writers. My family were, they weren't writers. And it felt like kind of an exalted,
Right.
highly evolved race I could never be a part of. So I'm still shocked that I get to do this. I
Oh,
pinch myself every time. I
mm,
can't believe it.
the Lord is good, and you're good, and you're getting you. Do you feel like you're getting better with each book?
I try. That's all I'm going to say. I
Yeah.
try really hard
Mhm.
to get better. Right now, I'm probably working on dialogue and I'm working on understanding emotions better to be able to write about them better. So I've
Mhm.
always got something I'm working on. So
Mhm.
those are probably the 2 things right now.
Mhm. What is your favorite book that you've written? Is that an unfair question?
Definitely the last one, Sanctuary. Yeah.
Okay.
Because set in Ireland, I read it for my mom.
Yeah. Oh,
Patrick read it for his mother.
you got to read it to her before she passed away?
No, no, she didn't know, but I read it for her.
Oh, you wrote for her. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I dedicated my first book to my mom, but she didn't really quite know what was going on by the time I finished it. I should have done it a year earlier.
My
Now I
mom
just,
did know I was a writer. So, she
oh,
um I had published a number of books before she passed away, and she used to buy books from me. No, she used to get books from me and sell them at her retirement facility and then
oh,
give me the money when I came. It was so cute.
that's what parents do. And when you were talking about your mom being a storyteller, my mom has had said on many occasions, I just am interested in people. And so she always was surrounded and told her stories, but also heard other people's. I think it just makes you feel loved when you feel listened to. Now I just finished reading Sanctuary, and I'd like to ask you some questions. Is it a bestseller in Ireland like it is here?
So this is interesting. I did not know this, Sue.
Hmm.
Um, I knew that Ireland has produced a lot of writers. Per
Yes.
capita, they produce way more writers than we do, and their writers are high literary quality,
Right.
honestly, in my opinion. They read more than we do. Irish people
Really?
read. Yes,
Wow.
the island is covered in bookstores.
Wow.
The grocery stores are full of newspapers. I
Mm,
mean, you find any grocery store now that has a whole wall of newspapers doesn't exist.
mm,
So they have their own thriving industry,
mm.
and they do not need an American produced book. So it has not really been sold in Ireland other than by Patrick to his local bookstores.
I'm surprised
Um,
because it's about one of their heroes. Even his dad was a
but
hero.
written by an American. So
Oh.
it's filtered through me and my voice. I try to write in Patrick's voice as much as I possibly could,
Hmm.
but it's really still written by an American. And of course, they're going to be able to tell that. So it's really was
Interesting.
written for Americans.
Hmm. First of all, what is it about? I think what you said was how donkeys help a young man suffering from alcoholism and PTSD, which is kind of a strange combination how donkeys can help. For one thing, the fact that there is even a donkey sanctuary. How did you get connected with him?
He wrote me an email off my website, and I've written
Really?
yes, several I've written several animal related books,
Oh, that's right.
dogs or horses.
Hmm.
And also I have a whole section on my website that refers to my, upbringing with horses. And
Mm,
my dad was a Texas cowboy. So I think he saw something there that he
mm.
liked. He was just looking for writers, happened to come across that. So he wrote me an email, and I didn't really believe what he said about, he told me a little about a story, and I thought, really? And your name is Patrick and you're from Ireland?
Yeah, is this in my spam folder for?
Right. So I researched him and his family, everything was checking out, and I bought myself a ticket and flew over there.
Wow.
And we met and, started talking, and he showed me around, and I met his family, and I thought, this is going to be an amazing story.
How exciting. And just the fact that you have Irish roots. What a blessing for you.
It was. as I was flying there and as I was there, I kept thinking, Mom, I hope you know. I
Yeah,
hope you know.
yeah. So great. How long did it take to write?
Um, from the time we met to the time it came out, it was 4 years.
Okay.
I would say the actual writing process was about a year.
Okay. One of the many ways Patrick was transformed was that he learned to appreciate the interconnectedness of his tiny village. I thought that theme kept coming up throughout the book. What did you personally learn, Susie, from writing his story? Any transformations?
That's a great question. I think one of the things I learned is in the US, among evangelicals, people who are Christians we're Protestant. If you're an evangelical, you're Protestant. Typically, there's a branch of Protestantism that is called evangelical.
Right.
And evangelicals often have not a great view of Catholic people.
Yeah.
And I was raised quite fundamentalist,
Mm,
very, very conservative. And I heard horrible things about Catholics and
hmm.
Catholicism.
Hmm.
And as I've gotten older, I've had a better, a more measured view, but still to be immersed in the world of Irish Catholicism, to meet all these people who have a strong faith, who love the Lord, who go to church. It really opened my eyes, and I thought that was a beautiful thing. And it strengthened in me the knowing that there is one church,
Hmm.
and it takes different forms, but we are one church. Catholics, Orthodox, and Protestant. So
And you did,
that's really one of the key things that
yeah.
I
And
carry with
I
me.
picked up on that because I was raised, well, I'm older than you, but I was raised with the same prejudice against Catholicism and rightly so in some regard. In fact, and I had a close girlfriend who said she couldn't visit my youth group because that was a mortal sin. I mean, that's wrong. But I had my own sins to worry about, so I didn't need to worry about hers. But reading your book gave me it refreshed that appreciation for the oneness we have in Christ and how beautifully God used nuns and other teachers in the church to help this young man, actually older at that point, to come to know God as his transformer, really, because he kept going to church whenever he had these horrible things happen to him. he knew where to go. And many evangelicals don't know where to go when they have horrible things go. And not that this is a discussion of that, but we forget. We go to our girlfriends, we go anything else, we go to drink, whatever. But he knew to go into church. He knew that was just something in him. I think God placed that in him. Do you agree?
I absolutely do. The first time I went to church with his wife, Eileen, I just felt God's presence there so
Mm,
strongly.
mm.
And I was actually just reading a study this morning of which country is the most peaceful country in the world. Peaceful, meaning violence, other aspects. And Iceland's number one, and Ireland is number two.
Wow.
America is 132.
Wow.
So think about it, Sue.
Mm,
The fruits of the spirit, love, joy, peace, all those things, peacefulness,
hmm
Ireland, Catholicism, we have no business looking down on them. They are more, I used to tell Patrick this all the time. They are more, I would say, Patrick, you guys are more Jesus-y than we are.
hmm Um, what was it that Patrick needed rescuing from? You use the expression, and he does too, that he was rescued by his donkeys, partially. What did he need rescuing from?
So the reason Patrick wanted to do this book is to bring PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, out into the conversation in Ireland. So he wanted to be able to talk about it openly. It had not been identified as early as in the US, and
Mm,
he came out of the Irish Army and out of some horrific experiences that he witnessed and was part of with horrible PTSD. It wasn't diagnosed, it wasn't something that was treated, and he just was kind of released and on his own. And he
mm,
didn't know what was wrong with him. He
mm.
just thought he was crazy.
But even before,
And then,
but Susie, even before then, though, because he had problems with acting out, alcoholism. So it was really a combination, you think?
yeah, I think so too. The Irish drinking is part of the culture for many people, not all. I mean, a lot of people through the church take a pledge not to drink. But, the pubs are the center of village life and
hmm
community life. And so alcohol is just part of it. And he was given alcohol when he was 7 years old
hmm
and just seemed to have that propensity, to get hooked quickly. So he had that going, but when he came out of the army, it was 100 times worse.
Yeah.
And so he just could not function. Everything kind of came to a head between the alcohol, other substances, and then just the PTSD not letting him be normal. He couldn't live a normal life.
Well, I can see then why he reached out to you. He needed to tell his story for the sake of all those other veterans. My husband's a veteran doctor, and so he sees this all the time. Um, and even early days in American history, they didn't know what it was. They call it shell shock or whatever, or just get your life together, but have no idea why the person's so just depressed or yells out in their sleep or can't keep a relationship going. Um, on page 83, I'm going to read this quote. I don't know how to pronounce her last name. It's Jodi Picoult.
I am not sure. I think it's Picoult.
Okay. Uh, it's the chapter 8, Penelope and Peanut. It's so cute because there's so many cute names to the donkeys. Let me tell you this. If you meet a loner, excuse me, no matter what they tell you, it's not because they enjoy solitude. It's because they have tried to blend into the world before and people continue to disappoint them. I thought that was so sad. I write a lot and speak a lot about loneliness. That's one reason I do, probably the bottom line reason I do hospitality, because everybody's lonely some of the time, and God can work through that. But there's a huge difference between loneliness and solitude. We all need solitude, even an extrovert like myself. But the pain of loneliness is so difficult. He writes, no one knew who I was anymore. I become an actor in my own life, a pretender who looked like I had it all together. That's so heartbreaking. And I think of my ninth grade students, the ones who always got in trouble all the time. They were acting out, and I may not have, I'm sure I didn't understand. I was just out of college. What was going on there in their home life or whatever. He wrote, I played the part of a hellraiser, and before long, I couldn't separate the role from the actual person I was on the inside. Or maybe that was the real me. Any comments on that?
I remember looking at photos with him, and his father had dug out this photo album. They're not as photo crazy as we are here. So they
Yeah.
don't have as many, aren't
Mhm.
using their phones all the time. So his dad digs out this old photo album with those plastic pages.
Yes.
And I was looking at pictures of Patrick from his army years and his teen years, and I thought, I don't know who you are. He's a completely different person. The photos really brought it home to me that he was two people.
Mm,
He had that dualism. And there's
mm.
a moment in the book where he's looking into this plate glass window in Dublin. I think he was living on the streets at that point, and he
Oh, yeah.
looks at himself and he sees some dark figure that is not him.
Hmm.
And that was the struggle that he had. Who's going to win? Who's going to win out
Who's going to
here?
win? Yeah. And I think this is why the book would be so effective for anyone, animal lovers, someone who's experienced any kind of trauma or just feeling lonely. He wrote, Mom and Dad had started a sanctuary for lost and hurt donkeys. I was a lost soul and needed sanctuary too. How did that come about that he was able to be rescued through the sanctuary?
So his dad started it. His mom was a huge part of it, taking in animals. And his grandfather actually also did the same thing. So he grew up around these donkeys and other animals, and the donkeys just kind of adopted him. There
Mm,
was one in particular named Aaron, who they
mm,
rescued from the Aran Islands,
yeah.
and he always felt accepted and unconditional love from Aaron.
Mm,
So Aaron was truly his best friend. He didn't have to perform for Aaron. He didn't have to prove himself. He always was loved by Aaron. And when he returned as a young man from the battlefield, he ended up with the donkey sanctuary, asked his father for a job because other things were not working out.
right.
And his father said, okay. And the donkeys again just accepted him. And
Mm,
so there was a healing process that happened, being kind of accepted into the herd, the community of donkeys, because donkeys live in community.
mm,
They cannot, it's very hard for them to exist on their own. And there's something scientists are studying called herd intelligence,
mm.
where animals, can communicate, where we cannot understand how they do it, and they can act as a unit, as a group.
Huh.
And so if you're accepted into that and loved and taken care of, there's a healing that happens.
Mm,
And so that was really part of his journey.
mm.
I don't think he'd be alive without the
About that.
donkey.
My friend Kathy Vick says that the church is not only to have a sanctuary, but to be a sanctuary. And I just think that's so beautiful and so true. We need to provide that safe place for one another as believers to grow and to fail and to be forgiven and then picked back up, which is what he found in church and with God, with his family, and then, of course, with the donkey. How does Patrick's story offer hope for those who feel alone or in despair? Kind of a big question.
Yeah, I what struck me about his story, because in the way I grew up, if you grew up evangelical or fundamentalist, you know the plan of salvation. You know the four spiritual laws, you know the tracks, you know the steps. And Patrick's journey, there were multiple moments of reaching out to God, people reaching out to him. It was a process. It was
Mm,
not a one time
right.
boom, you're saved, all your problems are over. And it really illustrated to me that you can reach out to God, He can reach back, and you can mess up. You can reach out to God again. He
I
can
think
reach
that's
out.
the story of my life, Susie. So I understand.
Ex- and we give up on people,
We do
don't we?
much
People
more
who
than God
struggle.
does, much more than
Yes,
God does.
right. People who struggle with addiction, I believe it takes an average of 4 years
Mm,
to get sober.
hmm.
And it's just a lot of false starts, and that's what happened with him.
A lot of
And
false starts. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, look at Peter. Um, at the very end, he writes, "Is this my life?" Oh, because things had turned around quite beautifully by the time you met him with his family and his kids. And he writes, "Is this my life? I never thought this could happen, and it did. I don't have to feel alone or lonely or like I don't belong anymore. And on my good days, I don't. And I loved it that he didn't always have good days because that's kind of what you were just saying. And on my bad days, I add this to my morning ritual. I put my hands out, palms up in front of me, and whatever is worrying me, angering me, plaguing me, or weighing me down, I place on my open palms. And then I envision laying those things on the altar and giving them to God. I mostly do it in the mornings, offering up my problems inside the house at my morning prayer and meditation time. But if needed, I can do it anywhere at any time. Now, to me, that's just the way we need to live our lives. And it's a beautiful thing. And then he uses the word, or maybe you, I'm not sure who's writing here, legacy on the next page. I was lucky, or maybe I was blessed to find a way out. I want to make my mother proud of me for being someone who works hard, takes care of his family, remembers what he's been taught, and rescues those put in his path who need help, whether human or animal. Now, there's a legacy worth living. Hmm.
Yeah, he's a very loving person
Mm.
because I think love has been shown to him, unconditional love by many different people and animals. And he actually now works for the Irish Army and he helps people with PTSD.
Wow.
So all
Well,
that
that was,
happened after the
yeah.
book.
And that was, oh, after the book.
Mhm.
Well, that was his dream. And isn't that the story of our life? Beauty for ashes.
That's
And
right.
the fact that we receive comfort from God, and then we get the privilege, and we have more of a platform to share when we've been hurt ourselves or when we've experienced grief. It's a beautiful story of hope and legacy, and thank you for bringing it to us. I heard you speak on theology and writing when I was at the conference, and I thought that was such a great um, way to end it for me. I think that was my last one workshop to attend. And I know your legacy has to do with words. So as we close this out, why leave a legacy with words? Why do you think that's important?
I look to how God communicates with us, and He
Oh.
communicates with us in a lot of different ways. It is not just one way. It can be through nature, it can be through other people, it can be through art and music, it can be through a sermon. But the primary way that He points to is the Word,
Mhm.
the Old Testament and the New Testament. And this is sort of the enduring record that we have of God's words, of Jesus's life and actions. And so I think that words have an eternal quality to them
Mm.
and a power to them. And the Spirit, I believe, can inspire us as writers as much as it inspired the writers of the Old and New Testament. If we surrender and ask God to anoint us and to
Mm.
speak through us, I
Mm.
believe He does that. I also believe, I can't prove this, Sue,
Mm.
but I do believe if you write with that, inspiration, what God has put on your heart, I think those books are going to be around a while, whether on paper, in digital places, or in people's hearts and souls and spirits. I also believe they're going to live on after us, and I
Mm.
believe there's going to be a big library in heaven with all of our books there.
With one of those magical tall ladders that slide back and forth.
That's right.
That's right. With cushions on the bottom in case I fall off. What are some good ways to leave a legacy with words?
I think telling your own story is a great place to start.
Mm.
Every person who loves God has a God story. Yours is going to be unique and different from anyone else's. And I would love each one who's listening, if you haven't done it yet, to begin to write down your story so that it can live on after you and so that people you know and people you don't know can read it. And you can print it off at your local copy shop if you
Yep.
want. You can upload it to Amazon and go that route. You can try other, directions as well. But I would
Mm.
encourage you to just start with one story of when
Mm.
you know God did something in your life.
I have wine nights every couple months, and so I invite about 40 women, and I get 8 to 20. And I just do conversation starters, and about half are of faith and half aren't. And but everybody loves to hear a story, and they love to tell their story, even the quiet The quiet, scary, scared ones. I have one gal who says, "Would you send me your conversation starters before I come tonight?" Because she's so shy. And of course, I do that. But it's so wonderful. And people say, I just love to hear everybody's stories, as long as they don't go on too long. But it's so true. We love to talk about ourselves, and we learn something about ourselves when we hear somebody else's story, because there's often afterwards, and there's lots of connecting. Oh, my mother as well. Or yes, I always wanted to be a ballerina too, but I have two left feet. When is the best time to start writing your legacy? Well, you just answered that. You said to start today. So everybody needs to get out their computers or their pens. Um, Writing your story brings joy. Why do you say that?
Oh, that's a good question. Writing your story brings joy. I think it helps you feel like there's a reason these things have happened to you,
Mm,
and that you can use the things that have happened to you, whether good, bad, or anywhere in between, to, like you said, connect with other people to help someone. And when I first started writing, I thought my goal was if I can just help one person
hmm
with this story or this book, that's enough. And
hmm
I still hold to that.
That's so great, especially if I've only sold one copy. I think,
That's
well, it was
right.
for that one person.
That's right.
Do you think, well, I think you know, have answered this too. Do you think everyone can or should write? Because I've read some bad writing.
I do believe so. Now, they may not be able to type, they may not know their grammar.
Hmm.
In that case, they can grab their phone or an old-fashioned tape recorder and
Yeah,
talk their
there
stories.
we go. Hmm. Is there a difference between saying I write and I'm a writer?
I think when you say I'm a writer, you have claimed that calling for yourself.
Hmm.
I think when you say I write, sometimes people just have a utilitarian mindset. They do it for work. It's not, they just don't view themselves as a writer. And then there are people who have kind of like a form of imposter syndrome.
Yes.
Yeah, I've met people who have published several books and won't call themselves a writer.
Isn't that interesting?
So
Yeah.
that's something they have to work through. But I do feel like if you're writing, and you just have that special sense of calling, even if you're writing a letter, I
Mm.
think you can call yourself a writer. Why
When
not?
you meet a stranger and they say, "What do?" You say, "I'm a writer." They often will say, because I've said that as well, or I'll say I'm a speaker or a podcaster, and they'll say, "Well, what do you podcast about?" And it can put you on the spot. It's like you need your little elevator speech, but it's you're authentic. You're an authentic person. So am I. So for me to say, "Well, I write about God and food," and they get immediately intrigued, but maybe not. They shut up as soon as I say God. But what are you saying when they say, "So you
Yeah, I
write?"
never say God for that reason. I
Uh,
also don't honestly don't, a lot of times don't call myself a Christian for that reason. I
mm,
might say I'm a Christ follower, I love God,
mm,
but don't even use that word. Um, so I usually give the high point, I give hooks. So
oh,
I'm
I
a
like that.
writing teacher. I know about hooks. I use hooks. So for the Donkey Sanctuary, I would say I'm writing a book about a man in Ireland who grew up in a tiny village with a castle on the corner. His father started Ireland's Donkey Sanctuary to rescue donkeys, never knowing that it would save his son. That's what I
Mm,
say.
never knowing that I would save my son.
Yeah.
Huh. Well, sometimes I like saying God because then it kind of gets the conversation going in a certain direction. But I see what you're saying. And it took me a while for me to say I'm a writer because I felt like an imposter. Well, you are anything but, Susie, and it's been such a blessing. And I hope everybody signs up for your Everything Memoir Facebook group. How can they find you?
Yeah, you can go to my website, susyflory.com. My mom
Okay.
was creative and spelled my name Susy,
Oh, yes, those mothers.
Flory, Flory. Or you can find me on Facebook, and my Facebook group, Everything Memoir, is free.
Mm,
There's a couple thousand people there, and I have about 30 video workshops that are free for you. So you can
mm,
just sample those like a buffet and learn some things about writing.
Well, thank you for your generosity. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you, Sue, for having me. It's been a
Sure.
delight.